Today's read aloud is Lesson 10, Atalanta and the Golden Apples. Our vocabulary today. The first word is skilled. This is an adjective. Gifted and able. Example, even at 10 years old, Manuel was a skilled musician. Skilled is one of our words that is going to go into our glossary. You're going to need to look on the second page of your glossary. Here's the word skilled, lesson 10. You're going to write down the definition right on these lines. Then you'll do a quick sketch. Skilled, gifted and able. Terms. This is a noun. Rules or conditions. Example, Paul's mother laid down some terms he would have to follow if he wanted to invite his friends over to play. Tremendously. Adverb. Greatly or enormously. Example, the circus was Bet's favorite place and she always enjoyed it tremendously. Resist. A verb. To turn down or say no to something. Example, Trixie loves snacks and she could never resist a fresh orange. Resist is one of our vocabulary words that goes into our glossary. Here it is on this page. Resist. Write down the definition and a quick sketch. Resist. To turn down. Or you could write say no. Now I want you to turn to page 19. We're going to look at the Meet the Characters page. Now I want you to turn to page 20. It's actually just on the other side of your vocabulary page, or your Meet the Characters page. And this is a quick sketch. And you'll be listening as I read the myth of Atalanta and the Golden Apples. When I pause the story, I want you to do a very quick 30-second sketch showing what just happened in the story. Now we're going to play a little game. We're going to name a place or character from the Greek myths that we've heard. And I want you to reply with another place, character, or word from the same myth. So, for example, if I say Hercules, you might say Atlas. So I've got the list of the stories up here. So if I say Prometheus and Pandora, what might you say? If I say Theseus and the Minotaur, what might you remember about this? If I mention Arachne the Weaver, what can you recall about this myth? What do you recall about Daedalus and Icarus? Tell about the 12 gods of Mount Olympus. What about Oedipus and the riddle of the Sphinx? And today we'll be reading about Atalanta and the Golden Apples. So if you remember, we read another Greek myth that involved golden apples. What was that myth called? In today's story, Atalanta and the Golden Apples, Atalanta is one of the main characters in this myth. She is shown in this image with her royal parents. The goddess Aphrodite is an important character in this myth. Remember, she is the goddess of love. Her son Eros is also shown in this image, hovering in the air with his bow and arrows of love. The other character in this image is brave Hippomenes. What other important objects do you notice in this image? What do you predict what role the golden apples will play in this myth? I want you to listen carefully to see if your predictions are correct. Long ago, in a peaceful little corner of Greece, there lived a king and a queen who loved each other very much. Although their kingdom was not large or wealthy, they and all their people lived happily. This king and queen had a daughter, a princess who was intelligent, beautiful, and a skilled, or gifted and able, huntress. She also happened to be the fastest runner in the world. Her name was Atalanta. When she reached a certain age, Atalanta's parents told her, "One day you will become queen, and ruling this land is too big a job for one person to do alone. It is time for you to marry." Why do Atalanta's parents want her to get married? To their surprise, Atalanta replied, "I can ask wise men or women to help me run the country. As for a husband, perhaps I shall have one some day, but for now there is no one whom I wish to marry." The queen asked, "What about all those fine young men who come around asking to marry you? Surely there must be one." "They care nothing for me, mother," Atalanta replied. "They only want to marry me in order to become king one day." But the king and queen insisted. So during this time in which the story takes place, and like today, it was very uncommon or very rare for an adult to choose not to get married. So because of this, Atalanta's parents were very surprised by her statement that she didn't want to get married. But that decision would not cause the same reaction today. Finally, Princess Atalanta said, "Very well, I shall marry the first unmarried man who can defeat me in a foot race." What does insisted mean? "What?" her parents exclaimed. They tried to talk her out of the idea, but they could not. So at last they agreed to her terms or conditions and sent word throughout the land. So what are Atalanta's terms? Do you think any man will be able to defeat Atalanta, the fastest runner in the world, in a race? As you might imagine, many young men came to race against the princess, hoping to marry her. She easily defeated every single one, enjoying herself tremendously, or greatly. One day after winning yet another race, she just kept running past the finish line for the sheer delight of it. She did not know that looking down from Mount Olympus that day was the goddess of love, Aphrodite. Why would Aphrodite be looking down from Mount Olympus? The goddess thought, "She is making a joke of love. I cannot allow this to go on." Is Aphrodite upset or happy about Atalanta's behavior? What do you think Aphrodite will do? Now, at that same moment, a young man was walking along the same road upon which Atalanta was now running. The young man was a brave adventurer named Hippomenes. He was just returning from a long sea voyage or journey, so he knew nothing of the princess's challenge. As Hippomenes walked along, he glanced ahead and saw the most beautiful young woman he had ever laid eyes on running his way at an unbelievable speed. It was Atalanta, of course, and as Hippomenes was looking at her, the goddess Aphrodite was looking at him. Turning to her son Eros, Aphrodite said, "Go shoot an invisible arrow of love into Hippomenes' heart, so that he will fall in love with Atalanta." So Eros did as he was told, and Hippomenes instantly fell in love with Atalanta as she ran by him. He thought, "I have never seen such joy on a human face. I would not have thought it possible, but I believe I have fallen in love with her." At once he began to pray to Aphrodite for help, which is what the goddess had planned all along. Why does he choose to pray to Aphrodite out of all of the gods and goddesses? She appeared before Hippomenes and told him that he must outrace Atalanta if he wanted to marry her. "But this is impossible, my lady," Hippomenes told Aphrodite. "I'm a very fast runner, but I've never seen anyone move as Atalanta does." The goddess presented Hippomenes with 3 apples made of purest gold that shone almost as brightly as the sun. "When Atalanta sees these apples, she will not be able to resist picking them up," Aphrodite said. Would you be able to resist or stop yourself from picking up golden apples such as these? Here is what you must do. The next day, Hippomenes challenged Atalanta to a race. Inside his rather loose-fitting clothing, he had hidden the 3 golden apples. Before the race, he told Atalanta, "Your Highness, I want you to know why I am racing against you." Atalanta answered, "In order to marry a princess and become a king someday." Is Atalanta correct? To her shock, he replied, "No, in order to marry the woman I love. She just happens to be a princess." Then he walked to the starting line while Atalanta thought, "There's something different about this one." Still, she took her place next to him. A moment later, the race was on. Atalanta began to pull ahead almost at once, but Hippomenes drew one of the apples from inside his clothing and tossed it ahead of her and a little off to the side. The moment Atalanta saw the apple, she had to have it. What do you think will happen? She turned and went after it, She picked it up. She saw Hippomenes ahead of her, and losing no more time, she took off like a deer. Soon Hippomenes heard her footsteps closing in behind him. Drawing out apple number 2, he held it up so she would see it and tossed it back over his shoulder. She turned right around and ran back to get it while Hippomenes ran on. Grabbing the second apple, she saw Hippomenes halfway to the finish line. This time Atalanta took off after him like a speeding cheetah dashing across the grasslands. Soon Hippomenes could hear her rapid footsteps getting closer, and he took out apple number 3 and threw it into a nearby field of tall grass. Of course Atalanta went after it, hunting through the grass for the golden fruit, while Hippomenes kept running. This one, too, she held in the palm of her hand as she returned to the race. Here the word palm means the inside of a person's hand between the wrist and fingers. The word palm can also mean a kind of tree that grows in tropical regions. In all of Atalanta's life, she'd never run as fast as she ran then. Her feet seemed not to touch the ground. Faster and faster she moved, and closer to Hippomenes she came. He told himself, "Don't look back or you might lose a step." Now she was only 3 steps behind him, now 2 steps, now just 1. And then she thought to herself, would it be so terrible if I did marry him? And as she thought that, Hippomenes gained a step and crossed the finish line before her. What happened after that? What do you think happened after that? Well, I'm glad to say that Atalanta kept her word and married Hippomenes, and I am even gladder to say that she had been right. There was something different about him, and soon she loved him as much as he loved her. Hippomenes never minded that Atalanta could outrun him. He was just happy to be the one running with her. So what was the name of the hero in today's read aloud? Which Greek gods or goddesses appear in today's read aloud? What makes Atalanta special or different from others? Hippomenes finally beats Atalanta in a foot race. How does he do this? Does Hippomenes defeat Atalanta on his own, or does he have help? What setting was mentioned in this myth that gave you a clue that it was a Greek myth? In the read aloud you heard today, when Atalanta sees these apples, she will not be able to resist picking them up. Say the word resist with me. Resist. If you resist something, you turn it down or say no to it. Daniel had to resist staying up too late to read his comic book because he needed to be rested for his test in the morning. Have you ever had to resist something? What's the word we've been talking about? Resist.